Okay guys, unit 2, last video. This is the business cycle lesson. It's super short and it's super helpful for what we're doing in the next two units, 3 and 4. So what's a business cycle? We've gone over it. It's a period of GDP increase and a period of GDP decrease above and below the natural rate of unemployment. So the first thing we're going to see is this graph. It looks like the straight line going through within this wavy line. So the straight line, let's identify what we're talking about. On the y-axis we have real GDP per year. This is real GDP. As it goes up, GDP is increasing. And this is time. So over time, years. Okay. So the straight line is the potential GDP. Potential GDP. That's where we could be as a society. The real GDP is the wavy line. Okay. So when the wavy line, the GDP is increasing, we say that we're in a period of growth. I don't have the word here, but I should. This is the word growth. We're growing as an economy. Anytime we're going up, right, the GDP is going up. When we're going down, we are receding. We're shrinking as an economy. That's the GDP idea. But there are a number of other things you can point out when you see this. At the top, you have this peak. This period, piece right here is where we have periods of inflation or higher inflation. Down here, we see periods of, yes, deflation, but more importantly, we see GDP growth getting smaller and smaller. And when output gets down, you must realize unemployment is going up. So as the GDP falls down to the trough, or as the bottom, then unemployment is going to be rising. This entire area from here to here is one business cycle. Okay? Generally, they last about 10 years, although it's, again, times are changing, so maybe they'll last, they're going to be shorter or longer, but that's generally the old way of thinking in most economics textbooks. Okay, I think we're done over here. There are three things that we're looking at when you look at a business cycle. You're looking at GDP, looking at unemployment, you're looking at inflation. Okay, inflationary. Later on, we're going to talk about inflationary gaps. Well, the inflationary gap is here. The recessionary gap is here, where the unemployment is high. All right. Now that you got that, how does it connect to these three graphs? You got three graphs and they're all connected. The business cycle graph we just looked at, I made it look a little cleaner. I put points A, B, and C. The old graph we used to look at was the PPF. Can you figure out where A should be, where B should be, and where C should be on this graph? Give it a try, think in your head. All right. Well, at this point, right, we usually have 3 points that we talked about in a PPC. The point where we're producing most efficiently will be the point where GDP is where it kind of should be. Everybody who can work is working. There are no empty factories. Anybody who wants to work can work. There's about 5% unemployment. That point is right on the line, right, at the potential GDP. So this line you're seeing, potential GDP, in a sense, is very similar to this line, right, capital goods and consumer goods. So point A on the graph, or even here, this could be point A as well on the graph, on the potential. That is going to be point A. So where's there? Let's look at point B. Point B, you see a recessionary period. There's unemployment. There's empty factories. We're choosing to pull back production as a society for some reason. So your recessionary is going to be B, where the inefficient point is. And B, remember the inefficient? And we say that unemployment is up here. Unemployment is up. And then, of course, out here, this inflationary gap, this is where it's impossible to produce as a society because we're inflated. We're overproducing, right? We don't need to be producing this particular much. We're having what's called an inflationary gap, and here it's called impossible to produce, so this would be our point C. So there's another graph. Oh, before we get to there, here are the things that the PPC and the real GDP, the business cycle, are connected. They show us full employment, right? A and A is full employment. They show us unemployment below here, inside here, and they show us inflation above here or outside of the PPC. There's a third graph that we're not going to talk about until halfway through Unit 3, and then, of course, all of Unit 4 and the rest of the year. And that's called your aggregate demand and aggregate supply graph. Don't write it down just yet, just look at it, because these points are all connected here as well. Over here you see not just the price of one good, but the price of all goods. That's called price level, the average price of all goods and services. Down here you see GDP. Same thing as you see over here, same thing as you see. Essentially this is your GDP line in a sense for this one. But then you see the letter Y. Y just means income. So you have the output approach, we talked about that, and you have the income approach, right? It's just two different ways to this. The number is the same. The output approach, the real GDP, and overall income is the same number. So over here, you see YF. We've gone over this before. YF meant income at full employment. So if my real GDP over here, this point here, this must be where A must be, and where A must be, and where A must be. So therefore, A is going to be, in this case, this point right here. All right. So then where's B? Well, look at the output. Here's zero output, and here's price level. This is inflation, right? Inflation. So therefore, GDP is increasing. That means unemployment is going down. So let's take a look. Where would unemployment be going up? Well, unemployment goes up when we're producing less output, right? Here and here. Well, less output is closer to zero. So point B is somewhere to the left of full, will be over here. And you figure out where point C would be, the inflationary point, or the impossible to produce point. In this case, point C is somewhere up here. Right? Inflation goes up, price levels, so prices are rising. Down here, prices are dropping, so B, and to the left. But the key here is to look at where is the output. This is 5% unemployment. They call this the long run aggregate supply. Don't worry about that just yet. All right? But these three graphs are connected. Point A, B, and C are all in the same spot. That's how you would graph this if you ever had to. You don't have to. So same rules apply for PPC that apply for GDP. If there's a change in technology, the PPF is going to increase. Quantity, quality of resources, or trade, this is all going to shift to the right. Same thing here. If this shifts to the right, then this whole potential GDP will also shift up. In the other graph, it's a different curve. You have the long run aggregate supply. In the other graph, the long run, this vertical curve here will shift to the right to show growth. But don't worry about that graph just yet. We'll get into that later. Now, with all that being said, you should definitely take a few notes down. When you see an expansionary period, the characteristics are a drop in unemployment, real GDP up, growth is generally rapid, prices are higher, and generally there's fewer social problems. When people are busy, they have work, they have income, there's less stress on society overall. It's not a fix-all necessarily. Quality of life is a relative concept. So in a recessionary period, notice it's in red, because generally recessions, you're losing money as a society, you're losing output, you're losing growth. Unemployment is up, real GDP is down. Reduction in job growth, lower interest rates. That's for a number of reasons. We'll go into why that happens. And then prices go down overall, and you generally have more social problems, okay, when you're in recessionary periods. All right? Hope you can make the connection. You're going to need that graph to think about later on in the next unit. Business cycle, unit 2.